I've spent over 20 years of my life as a member of the profession of arms. One of the hallmarks of military service is candor. So let me expend some candor on what will be required of our next Commander-in-Chief and the 4 principles that he must understand. First, our next President must understand that enemies do not capitulate because of what you have done to them, but what they think you're about to do to them. The Japanese did not surrender because of 2 atomic bombs, but rather their inability to withstand the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, etc. The Ayatollah Khomeini did not return our citizens to us in 1981 after 444 days of captivity in Tehran because of what President Carter had done to the Iranian leadership, but rather because of what they knew Ronald Reagan would order. In 2003, Libya did not reveal its nuclear program to the United States because of the effects of UN sanctions, but rather because Mr. Gaddafi watched the willingness of the United States to remove Saddam from power and then pull him from a hole in Iraq because he didn't want to find himself in the same circumstances. When the United States House of Representatives, now under the control of the Democrats, debated the United We Quit resolution this past February, the liberals, in fact, demonstrated that the United States, as an enemy of Al-Qaeda and Islamo-Fascism, was far more concerned with what they may do to us than what we were going to do to them. Our liberal friends made this point very clear on behalf of our enemies by even considering such a resolution. Second, casualties are never the measure of success or failure. They are the measure of cost. The choice is not between taking casualties or not. That is a false choice. The true choice is what are we going to achieve while we are taking those casualties. Defense is not one of the 8 principles of war. While on defense prior to September 11th, we've been taking numerous casualties, like the 1973 murder of our U.S. ambassador to Sudan, Ambassador Noel, by Palestinian terrorists. In 1983, the 63 dead at the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. 6 months later, 241 Marines dead at the barracks in Beirut. 1984, 18 dead airmen in Torrejon, Spain. 1985, 20 dead at the U.S. Embassy Annex in Beirut. TWA 847, where Seaman Stedham was beaten to death and dumped on the tarmac in Beirut. The Kuwaiti airline hijacking, where 2 Americans were killed and the perpetrators flee to Iran. Mr. Klinghoffer aboard the Achille Lauro, shot and then shoved over the side of his wheelchair. You do not need me to run through the list since Mr. Klinghoffer's death. The bottom line is that while on defense, the enemy is testing your patience and pain tolerance. Offense means you're testing his. If we quit the war on terror, especially in Iraq, we will not only see Mr. Sadr become to Iraq what Mr. Nasrallah is to Hezbollah and Lebanon, and what Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are to Israel. We will continue to tolerate the mosquitoes that come out of the jihadist swamp instead of solving the strategic problem by draining the swamp. General Sherman's wisdom is still true today. Every attempt to make war easy and safe will result in humiliation and disaster. Long ago, we tired of seeing our citizens slaughtered and our enemies knowing we were not willing to accept the casualties that would come from inflicting great peril or death upon them. You must choose a man who will ensure we do not return to such a posture. Third, the cost of inaction. Every presidential candidate will tell you they know the gravity and responsibility of sending our finest to fight. No president leads a nation to war flippantly, but he must also consider the long-term consequences of not acting. The person whom you must choose is the one that knows that he must foremost consider the lives of our citizens first, those our military are protecting, not the lives of those doing the protecting. While our current Congress wants to remove our soldiers from the battlefield from a perspective of compassion on our soldiers and their families, doing so is also compassionate upon the enemies they are there to defeat. And being compassionate upon our enemies is to fail the larger American population.